Let's do it. Hi, welcome. This is Body Dynamics Lunch and Learn webinar series. I'm Anna Fiore. I am a physical therapist here. Hold on one second. I'm a physical therapist here at BDI. I've been a dancer and a dance instructor myself. Started all the way when I was 3. I'm really excited to share some information today on dance medicine and specifically dynamic warm-ups. If you missed our first webinar, dance medicine webinar, that was on injury prevention. And if you're interested in that information, you can reach out. We have contact info at the end of the slides. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that we're recording this webinar. So if you I think it'll be helpful for everyone to have to reference because we'll do a little bit of moving in the session. I want you to be able to look back at that to remind yourself. Once that file is sort of set, downloaded, then you can look for an email from me with that. So today we'll run through some slides. Then we're going to do a little bit of movement, like I said. Then at the end we'll do Q&A. So your Zoom toolbar has a Q&A button where you can submit your questions as you think of them. You don't have to wait until the end to submit them. We'll just review them all at the end. And then you can use the chat function if you have any tech issues or anything like that. I'm here and then Mike is here helping sort of filter through some of that if anything goes awry and I'm distracted or moving. So here's our objectives for today. We'll review the basics and just define what a warm-up is to begin with. We'll discuss the purpose and goals of a warm-up routine. We'll lay out 4 parts that any warm-up should have, and then we'll discuss guidelines to help you develop your own routine. At the very end, I put together a really simple version of a warm-up for us to work through together. So I'll get up and demonstrate, and I hope that you'll move with me at this point. So the basics first. Warm-up can be defined as a series of movements performed in a progressive, deliberate sequence of low to moderate intensity in order to meet the demands of the upcoming activity. It's movements that should be specific to the activity you're preparing for. So for us, that's dance. But you can go even further than that and be style specific. So I tried to keep a lot of styles in mind as I developed this presentation. But as you sort of take what I give you and grow that further, make it your own, you can certainly add more things that are specific to your style, or even, that might change as choreography changes. So your warm-up, it's purposefully dynamic, meaning it's dynamic in the motion, but also as you grow. So before we get too far, I want to talk about stretching. This slide was in the injury prevention webinar, so you might recognize that if you've attended both. But I wanted to revisit because a lot of dancers use static stretching before class. It's really easy to do. It feels good. You can sort of sit in your straddle and talk with your friends before bar. But if this sounds familiar to you, please stop. I want you to be the change for your dance studio. A reminder from last webinar that static positional holds that are typical of stretching can actually inhibit the power in a muscle and make it harder to fire when you need it to. So a lot of questions last webinar came up around this point. So that's why today I wanted to circle back, and we'll be filling in some of the blanks around what that dynamic warm-up in the before dance category really looks like. So why bother? A paper from the Australian Sports Initiative Athlete Training Center describes 6 goals of a dynamic warm-up. It all starts by increasing your body temperature. At even slightly elevated temperatures, muscles can work more efficiently and contract with greater forces. So as you start to move, your body starts to require more energy, consume more fuel, and the byproduct of that consumption is heat. So It's sort of a cyclical pattern. You have to get your temperature up in order to meet those demands for dancing. And along with that, your warm-up also preps your heart and lungs to engage more intensely in activity. So the cardiovascular system is what provides that fuel that your body is consuming, at least partly. And then third point, the dynamic warm-up is actively elongating muscles. It improves elasticity of muscles, tendons, ligaments. It increases the flow of synovial fluid actually in your joints, those things that kind of lubricate. Basically, it just gets you ready to move more freely. It also, the warm-up can also help solidify proper movement patterns, and it gets your body ready to move within sort of the confines or definition of your dance technique or style. The warm-up can wake up your nervous system too. It gets your brain-body connection sort of firing on all cylinders so that you can be more reactive, more on balance, more coordinated with your dance movements. And then lastly, the dynamic warm-up just facilitates awareness in your body, and it can help focus you on your activity. So we'll start with the 4 parts now. So this is based off of a study from the International Association of Dance Medicine and Science. Some people have heard IADMS, and it lays out the 4 important parts. So the parts include cardiovascular exercise, joint mobilization and muscle lengthening, and strength and proprioception. The paper it does lay it out in this specific order, and it does sort of isolate each one, but I find that, movement is it's hard to actually like keep them in one category. Many movements are going to fill more than one part. And then also, if you are particularly hypermobile, you might consider reversing the order so that you start with your stability exercises first before you do the mobility, the joint mobilization, the dynamic stretching sorts of things. But just for the sake of clarity, today we're gonna walk through each category independently, and then we'll follow this order. On the next 4 slides, I assigned a color to each category, so that way when we get to the movement part, when we're actually running through the routine, you can see where each of those exercises or movements fall in each category. So cardio to start. As I mentioned, one of the goals of your warm-up is to get your body temperature up, and we'll do that by raising your pulse. So you'll start your warm-up with 5 or 10 minutes of continual movement, and it can be anything that you feel ready for. It might just start bouncing in place. Maybe it's a prance or a skip, or if you've already been moving for the day or you're particularly warm already, you might just go for a jog. Depending on the season, your choice of movement might change. How long you feel like you need to exercise here might change. But sort of at the basis is choosing a simple repetitive movement that gives you a good chance to check in with your body, see what it's feeling like for the day, get your blood flowing. That's orange. So the second part is joint mobilization, which we'll define as moving a joint through its full range of motion in a slow, controlled manner. As opposed to a typical stretch, a joint mobilization, your muscles are staying active during the movement and they're creating and contributing to that motion of the joint. This is simple things like ankle circles or spinal articulation or, hip swings, that sort of movement. These will be in blue. So next is muscle lengthening, which is your active dynamic stretching. You're moving that muscle through its full length of motion. So it's defined sort of similarly to the joint mobilization, but different emphasis. Muscles are typically working in pairs that are creating opposite movements at a joint. So we could say that contracting one muscle can create lengthening in the other across the joint. And again, the muscle is staying active and dynamic with that muscular control, as opposed to your static stretching where you're just lengthening it and then holding it there. And then the last part is going to be your strength and proprioception. And sometimes I sort of consider these lumped together in my brain and call it just like facilitation exercise. They're just preparatory exercises to increase control over one area of the body. So for dancers in particular, that's going to be important to do for abs, glutes, your deep rotators, your turnout muscles, and then calves and feet. Proprioception is defined as your body's sort of sense of awareness or sense of position in space, or sort of sense of change via movement. So you can factor proprioception into things like your coordination, your balance, and even some of those like quality descriptors of your music, of your movement. Sometimes things like music would be part of that. And I think proprioception is something that can kind of take a dancer from technique driven to skill. So having that isolated control over a specific muscle group is going to contribute to that proprioception and is going to contribute to that skill. And you can train proprioception with balance exercises. You can practice moving while you're limiting other senses, like closing your eyes to eliminate your vision. And then anything like just free movement with emphasis on timing, like I said, musicality. You can play with things like how you're driving your energy. Is it circular? Is it linear? You can play with, slow controlled or really percussive. You might notice the shape that you're drawing in space with your body, what initiates your movement, sort of that improvisational play. So I think no matter your style of dance, that sort of movement, sort of curiosity about movement, improv movement is really good for developing proprioception. I didn't include a ton of that in like the routine that we'll walk through, but that's sort of just something you can play with on your own, I think. So those 4 parts are a really good framework, but I also found, oops, sorry, I'm knocking my computer around. I also found some guidelines that are just going to help you develop further on your own your routine, and make it your own a little bit more. So embedded in these guiding points are the 4 parts we just discussed, but this will give you some more detail about what to think about as you're shifting and changing on your own. So let's see, it says involve your mind, take a moment to center yourself, check in with how you're feeling, notice any areas where you need to give special attention. And that can be going on throughout. You might, even before you start moving, just find some stillness and sort of check in with yourself, do some breath or meditation if you like doing that, or you can incorporate that into your initial movement, that cardio movement, where you're just doing something simple and repetitive, and you can sense, ooh, my ankles feel tight, or that shoulder is nagging me, or whatever it might be. Maybe you feel awesome. Point 2, make your warm-up dance and style specific. Introduce activity gradually to increase your heart rate. That's what we've sort of been talking about, starting with cardio maybe. Keep movement simple, then progress to more complex. Mobilize all the joints in your body. Don't forget about your spine and upper body. I've incorporated quite a bit of this because from a PT perspective, I think it's really, really important. And then the upper body stuff, like, depending on your style, that might be more or less important if you're partnering, or if you do more modern dance, you're doing some more weight bearing on your hands, or even like hip hop sometimes does a lot more weight bearing on your hands. Next slide, here's some more points. Give yourself a goal or try some positive self-talk. I think that's just important, period. Use dynamic stretching. Take your body carefully through full ranges of motion, saving static stretching for the cool down at the end of the day. Wake up your nervous system by incorporating quick changes in direction. stopping and balancing on one leg, again, to engage those proprioceptors that we were talking about. Once you're feeling warm, introducing some power movements, small jumps, followed by bigger ones. And then towards the end of your warm-up, pick up the pace, progress your movement to speeds near the pace of your following dance activity. That one might be like more if you're in the midst of choreography or rehearsal or something. Because typically you're doing this warm-up and then your class is going to have some amount, whether it's like full bar or, you know, a floor warm-up or something, but you're not usually, unless it's rehearsal, diving straight into your max speed. Okay, so I'll show you our routine next. So if you haven't already, clear a little bit of space for yourself. Here it is in words. So I mentioned the color coding. I'll review. So the orange is your cardio. Blue is joint mobilization. Green is muscle lengthening. Purple is strength and proprioception. And like I mentioned, it's not always that it's within one category, as you can see here, especially the joint mobilization and muscle lengthening, they tend to go together quite a bit. I'm emphasizing both mobility and stability with this routine, and I tried to get a total body. I think that these are simple movements and exercises that everyone could benefit from and that you should know how to do for yourself, no matter the dance style. And then, like I was saying, if you're integrating this into your dance practice, you'd also want to be building in any specific exercises for your own weaknesses. If you've had PT before and you have some specific exercises, the warm-up is a good place to integrate those. And then, like I had mentioned, style-specific stuff. You know, if you're a tapper or an Irish dancer, I have some foot, you know, articulation, warm-up, stretching, but maybe you'll want to do more. And again, with the upper body, I really mostly emphasized a little bit of stability, but mobility for the upper body. So if you're doing a lot of partner work, you might want to incorporate some more upper body strength. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen. I have to adjust my camera a little bit and then we'll get moving, okay? Give me a second. I do feel weird just talking to myself and dancing by myself, but do what we can. Let's see if this is a good angle. I think that's decent enough. Good. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is just prance in place. Maybe you start with a bounce if you're feeling pretty cold, but I already did this routine a couple of times today. So I'll prance in place a little bit. Maybe 2, 3, 1, alternate. You can travel in space. I don't have a ton of space without getting out of the camera, but you're just trying to start waking up your body, getting your heart rate up a little bit. If you're moving around your studio, now is the time to kind of still keep it simple, keep it slow and controlled, as opposed to quick changes or anything, which we can incorporate later. So there you go, there's your cardio. That's not the whole time, but you get the idea. You need to watch me prance for 5 minutes. Then you're gonna start with a little bit of lunging here. You can do it across the floor. For the sake of space, you can also just do it in place here. Again, it's a good full body movement. Maybe you're getting a little bit of stretch in the front of the hips and the thighs. You're getting some stability work. Always be thinking about core stability, belly button to spine. Then you can shift to a lateral lunge. And this can be whatever you want it to be, really. You know, you can keep it simple. You can add a little bit more flair if you want to do arms, or bras, whatever feels good. You know, come back to center. You're going to do a little bit of a backwards walk with an arm overhead. Feel this stretch through the Side body, front of the hip, hip flexors. This can travel again, or you can stay in place. So after that, you're gonna roll forward. Spinal articulation. So each segment of your spine is moving independently here. Bend and stretch. I'm staying in parallel right now. Roll up, reverse that articulation. So you're getting the articulation of your spine. Then at the bottom, you get your hamstring stretch. Bend and stretch. A little bit of low back stretch when you bend your knees. Let your tailbone curl around you. Roll back up. You can start with some arm movement. Do these little V-ups. As you're doing this, you're still using your abs, right? Because otherwise, your rib cage is going to move with you. For now, you're trying to mobilize the shoulder, not the ribs. So use your abs here. Then you can V up to drop release. That always feels good. You can go back to just the V's. If you wanted to put on some music, you can put on music of your style, of whatever you like. It doesn't have to be, you know, if you're warming up for ballet, but you don't want to already listen to ballet music, that's fine. Then you're gonna do, I like to call this baby bird, mama bird. Baby bird, mama bird. Stretch across the front of the chest. Again, you're still using your abs to limit your rib cage movement. Feels good. And you can move around space while you're doing this if you want. Stay static if you want. Just moving your shoulders. Okay, what's next? Then we're gonna go to the bar if you have a bar, or a back of a chair, something just to stabilize with. From here, you're gonna set up in your, set up in your sixth position. I like to keep it narrow. If you want to do parallel but hip width, that's fine too. I like narrow, so it just requires at least a little bit more balance. Head circles. Good, slow and controlled. Maybe it's a full 8 count per circle. And you reverse it. Two circles is good. Whatever you like. Forward cross side. And then round your spine forward. You might even bend your knees here as you curl all the way around. Forward cross side. Feel the side stretch. And then back cobra. And then other side, forward cross. And curl forward. You can pause here and hang from the bar if you want to get even more spinal movement. And if you sort of break your pattern, don't forget to return to it. Then you're going to twist. Grab the bar with your back hand. Hold a second, not a long stretch per se, but just getting that twist through your spine. Still thinking about keeping your pelvis neutral, you're not arching your back. Reverse the other side. Maybe you'll get a little bit of snap and pop. Quad stretch. Again, tuck this hip bone up towards your rib cage so that you're getting the most stretch there. Repeating the other side. You'll come to a big second position, turned out, grand plie. Roll forward, turn to parallel. Roll up. And cobra back. Back to second, round. Turn in. Roll up. Cobra. Then you're going to face the bar again. Parallel sixth position. Here comes your foot warm up. I think you can see my feet okay. It's a tread. And plie, forward arch, left. Drop your heels, feel like you're squishing something underneath them. And other side. 3, forwards, plie, roll, up, drop. Again with the tread. This time you reverse, up, forced arch, drop the heels. Last time in this motion, I'm speeding, up, forced arch, down. Tendu parallel to the front, really brushing the floor. Feel like you're articulating demi-point, 3/4 and full, and reverse it. One more. Hold there, ankle circles. Slowly, both directions. You're trying to draw a really smooth circle. There's going to be some segments where it like kind of wants to jump on you, but you're smoothing out that motion. Tendu, brush it back, half, stretch. You might do a little bit of demi-point, drop the heel, just to keep it dynamic. Then bend your knee to get soleus part of your calf, the lower part closer to your Achilles. And then other side, tendu, really brushing the floor, circles, tendu, stretch, make it dynamic, and bend the knee for the soleus. Attitudes. They can be small, they can be big, whatever you're ready for. You'll do both sides. Your arm can swing or it can stabilize. Figure eights. Again, as high as you want it to be. It can stay here. It can just be sort of a coup de pied drag situation. Whatever feels good. I don't remember what's next. So that's really the most dynamic aspect. My heart rate's pretty high right now. So you've done your cardio, you've done all of these movements. It doesn't have to be as fast as I just did it all. I just don't want to waste your time just watching me. But now we're going to come onto the floor and do a little bit more like PT warm-up sorts of exercises. So you're going to start on your back with some core work. It's gentle. It's not like doing Pilates 100 or, I don't want you to necessarily feel a burn, but just like those muscles are waking up. So you're here on your back. You're engaging your abdominal muscles to create that corset towards your belly button. Am I in the frame? I think I am. Okay, thanks, Mike. So belly button into the spine. You're not flattening your back, but you're not arching it either. You're just really neutral. You might even, if you took a triangle here across your pelvis, it shouldn't be sloshing backwards or forwards. Then you're gonna open the hip, slide the leg down, turn it in, bring it back. So you're rotating it, sliding it, rotate back up. And you can reverse that circle. But you are mobilizing that hip joint. You're freeing up that hip joint from any extra motion in your pelvis or trunk, right? So if I wasn't using my abs, I'm gonna twist a lot more here, especially when I rotate. So you're already starting to stabilize against, your turnout if you're a ballet dancer or contemporary or any style that uses that. But so it's really about isolating the core so your hip can move freely. Okay? So there's a good starting exercise. You might set a timer, do that for 2 minutes. The next is a segmental bridge. So everybody knows a bridge, but I really want you to think about, again, articulating each segment of your spine independent of the others. So you're on your back again. And it starts by rolling your tailbone under you, pressing your heels down into the ground. It's slow, it's a lift. This is as high as you need to go. If you start to push higher, now you're arching your back. So it's slow, 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 slow. Only go as high as you can while you're still using those glutes to propel you. And then on the way back down, you're thinking about the rib cage dropping in first. Then each segment rolling back down. And then when your sacrum hits the floor again, you relax to your neutral, and then you repeat. Should feel like work through those glutes, sort of where your leotard line is. Once you're up there, you can also play a little bit with shifting your weight side to side, sort of pressing one knee forward past the other, and then retracting the opposite knee in. Feels a lot, like you're gonna feel a lot more with that sort of railroad track shift. I feel my inner thighs a lot, and then I feel those sits bones a lot. So there's your core and your glutes. Clamshells, again, it's not groundbreaking, but I think if you can perform them well, they're a really important exercise. So when you lie on your side to start your clamshell, I want you to think about lifting your bottom waist up. You're not, like hanging on the beach. You're stacking this hip over the other. Then from there, belly button is in. You might feel like you're gonna round your spine a little bit to find a more neutral place. Then it's that top hip that rotates and lowers. So you're taking this leg bone, this femur, and just twisting it in the socket. And just like that rotation you did on your back for the first exercise, your pelvis doesn't move because you've set yourself up in the right position for your core to hold that stability. So again, it's sort of along that leotard line where you should feel some burning. And all of this is sort of up to your body how much you need. I sort of like to just do it by time. So set your timer and work through those exercises 2 minutes at a time. We'll do one more on the floor. It's a variation of a bird dog. So you're here on all four, opposite arm and leg extends. Only as high as they can go without anything in your trunk moving. Belly button's lifting away. You come back in. Here's the part I want you to emphasize is making this weight shift invisible. This is already sort of starting that proprioception and balance work. So you're working through this weight shift, which is so important for dancers. You don't necessarily think about that, but you're finding your stable leg so you can free up your other limbs to dégagé, battement, pirouette, whatever. Okay, so again, do it by time, it's easier. That way you can really think about what you're feeling in your body rather than however many reps you have to count. So then you're gonna stand back up, come back to the bar. Now we're doing balance and proprioception here. Again, I'm in parallel for now. So you're just finding your balance here. Stacking your bones. Don't necessarily think about, contracting anything right now. Just see if you can find alignment. And then you're gonna weight shift again. Flex one foot. Put it down. Shift. Put it down. Shift. It's harder than you were gonna think. And then you can do it in first position too. And this is actually, you're gonna have to shift further now that you're turned out, so really shifting and flexing. Whew. 30 seconds at a time. Repeat that 2 or 3 times. And then this would be the time that you can incorporate any of your other exercises or anything specific to your style. Any other proprioceptive work, like if you want to do that free movement, just sort of playing with what movement is leading you. play around with your musicality, that sort of stuff at this point. Then you're going to end with a little more cardio, but that prancing becomes sort of a bounding motion. And then you can start adding quicker directional changes. Again, I don't have a ton of space, but you know, like your modern runs, it's going to be a bigger thing. And then you can do quick shifts. You might try, you know, if you're in a studio or you're training at home, but you have someone else to dance with, you can play with coordinating with each other. That's an important aspect of choreography a lot of the times that no one really practices. So that could be interesting to add as well. Okay, I think I'm warm. I'm gonna pull the slides back up. Let me see. So now we have time for questions if you have any. I hope you have some. So someone asked, how long do you want to spend on static stretches at the end of class? No, I don't have a guideline for how long total, but I would say that each muscle group that you are stretching, you need to spend, you know, a minute and a half per muscle. So that means, you know, if you're, I'm blanking on like a stretch. If you're gonna sit in the frog position where you're stretching both hips at the same time, then you're gonna hold that for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. If you're gonna do a hamstring stretch, say you're doing like one knee bent, one leg straight in that pike, seated pike and you're forward folding, then you'll hold that a minute and a half, but then repeat it on the other side. The important thing is just that you're not spending time in those long duration hold stretches before you're asking your body to move. So even if, say, like you have a class and then you have your lunch break and then you're going back for rehearsal, you might do a little bit of static stretch, but like really I would advise you to do a little more of the dynamic stretch. And then like at the very, very end of your day, then you're gonna do the static stretching. Someone else asks, do you recommend wearing specific warm-ups if you have a certain muscle that is very tight? For example, warm-up booties for ballet. It can help. I don't think it's not gonna be a substitute for actually doing a dynamic warm-up to get your total body temperature up. But it can be helpful to give it a little, you know, like the garbage pants or a leg warmer or something. There's nothing wrong with those as long as your teacher is okay with you wearing them. Someone else asked, any other tips for stretching? I kind of covered sort of my spiel on stretching. Let me think if there's anything else I want to say. I don't think so. I think I spent a while on that. Do you have recommendations for hip and spine warm-ups for jazz or African styles which don't spend much time in neutral pelvis? I think I'll admit that that's not my greatest area of experience, but I think the neutral pelvis is important because you're building a home base. So if you have that ability to control neutral, then you have more freedom to get away from that and then come back without risk of injury. So it's just a nice, I guess, like I said, home base. Not that you have to spend all of your time in neutral. It's just a good idea to know what that is, so you have the freedom. And then hip and spine warm-ups. I don't want to say something that I'm not well-versed in, but if you email me, I can try to do some research because that would be a good thing for me to know as well. I would just think, you know, at least jazz-wise, any sort of isolation sorts of movements, you know, like you do the you're going to tilt forward and back and repeat that, and then side, circles. That's all I have in my brain right now. I think we're good there. Again, happy to communicate with anyone via email, so reach out if anything comes up after the webinar. I also wanted to announce that I'm going to be offering 5 free 20-minute consults to the first 5 participants who follow up with me via email. Same email as on the last slide. These can be in-person or virtual sessions, and it's totally open. Discuss anything. If you want to talk more about warm-ups, we could talk about warm-ups. We can talk about injury prevention. If you have a common correction from your instructor and you're like, I'm trying to troubleshoot how to actually integrate that, we can talk about that. If you're prepping for a summer intensive or a virtual summer intensive, we can talk about ways to get ready for that. So that's what I have for today. But if there's any topic that you have in mind, reach out. And we're back in the clinic for the most part, but we're still doing some of these virtual offerings. So if there's an idea for another webinar, I'd be happy to do another dance specific webinar. So thank you for attending. I hope to connect with some of you. Like I had mentioned before, the recording that we've done, I can email that out once we have it sort of downloaded and, tech stuff. So have a good weekend. Thank you.